In the name of the one holy and living God. Jesus said, when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. This must take place. But the end is still to come. For nation will rise up against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places. There will be famines. This is but the beginning of the birth pangs. This is not a conventional start to a convention address. But trust me, things will go up. They'll improve from here, I promise. Saints, as we gather in person and online for our second pandemic convention, the question I can't get away from is, what comes next? The gospel lesson we heard a few moments ago has Jesus just getting warmed up as he begins to lay out an apocalyptic vision of what is to come. And of course, in the days when Mark's gospel was being solidified and with the siege of Jerusalem and the Roman war within view, life must have been just insane with worry, tenuous, difficult, scary as anything that had ever come before it. Surely, with all of that, the end times were upon them. Things were so unspeakably hard. But the end times were never going to be the end. Something new was being born. The birth pangs were just beginning. What was coming next, though, it wasn't the good news immediately. What was coming next was betrayals and destruction, and Jesus' passion and death and resurrection. Jesus, as always, does not look away from the hard stuff. When the hard stuff comes, Jesus looks it straight on. He names it, and then he calls his followers to do the same thing. He calls his followers who were before, he calls us to do the same as we move through what looks like sure and certain death sometimes into new life. We know that new life is not found in the rearview mirror. New life is not found in the rearview mirror. It is found in facing the present and then moving forward in faith, trusting in God's love and companionship along the way. But just because we know that up here doesn't make it easy. The theme of this convention is bold witness to God's love, and we are called to witness boldly to what we see now, each and every day, and then to show up as our full selves, all of who we are, embodying the love of God in order to transform what is broken and in need of healing. And we're called to show up as our full selves, to rejoice in what has been made whole and given life anew, because that too is happening right now. This is the Christian witness. In season, out of season, on days when it seems like the world is imploding, and on days when you feel like God hung the moon and the stars just for you, we still show up. We are called to notice, to witness, to experience it all, understanding that God is always, always pulling us toward new life. I am often asked about what I think is the most exciting thing happening in the Diocese of Indianapolis. And I find it interesting, actually, because I'm asked that all the time. Like in the last 4 months, I've been asked it maybe half a dozen times. What is the most exciting thing happening in the Diocese of Indianapolis? And I love that question. And because I kind of get stymied a bit because I don't know how to begin the answer. And it's not because it's not one thing. It's not just one thing. It is the many ways the many ways that you all so beautifully show up in offering bold witness to God's love. When I'm asked about our diocese, I talk about the amazing ways that you've taken our diocesan mission to heart. This one, particularly over the last 12 months of this pandemic, 12 months of economic and social upheaval that continues to unsettle us. You have shone like beacons of Christ across central and southern Indiana. You've been feeding the hungry, standing up against racial injustice. You've been caring for those in need, comforting those who grieve. I talk about Grace Muncie, feeding people through Gathering in Grace, and St. Thomas Franklin hosting that weekly health clinic, which is the only place to get good free care in the county. I talk about St. Stephen's Terre Haute serving as a warming shelter and the Manna from Seven feeding ministry. I talk about St. Matthew's in Indianapolis putting its commercial kitchen to work in a food desert. And I talk about that not just because some of my favorite cookies are done out of that kitchen, but because it's a great ministry. It's a great way to share space. I talk about the Mid-North Food Pantry at Trinity, Indianapolis, and Sister Joanna's Table at St. Paul's in Evansville. I talk about the St. Nicholas Early Learning Center. Talk about childcare needs. We heard about that earlier. Oh my gosh, I go on and on and on. I talk about St. Andrew's Greencastle, stocking all of those bags of diapers and dried goods. I talk about the faithful people of St. Stephen's in the Fields in Elwood, who concluded their ministry in October. And I lift them up because it was an incredibly difficult thing, and yet a faithful act for the people of St. Stephen's to decide to end that active ministry of a congregation. Holy endings lead to new beginnings. The people of St. Stephen's embodied this belief, and this too is bold witness. And there are so many other stories and examples. During these unimaginably hard times, you have borne witness that God is faithful. That's the witness. So many ways in which you show that up. You, all of you, have borne that witness boldly. Beloved, as I've traveled around our diocese and the wider church, I've been delighted to tell these stories of the incredible ministry that we've done during these hard times. And I've also noted, some of you heard me say this before, I've noted that we are so tired. Because there is a cost. There is a cost to showing up this faithfully in these circumstances. And now, as we're taking these first tentative steps towards some kind of normalcy, it's becoming clearer and clearer to me that we are not going back to the way it used to be. We have been forever changed by this pandemic. Our congregations have been forever changed. Our church will never be the same again. And how could it be? How could it possibly be the same? If the COVID-19 pandemic and all of the things that we've been working on and trying to change those pre-existing conditions that make life so difficult for so many, the systemic racism that we stand up for and fight to dismantle, the whittling away of the social safety net, unlivable wages, the whole supply chain issue. I mean, there's like issue after issue after issue. The ongoing threats to democracy. I mean, the things that we talked about and heard in those conversations earlier today. Everything is being reshaped before our very eyes. Our economy is being reshaped. Our education system is being reshaped. How could we think that we would get by unscathed as the church? The world and so many things seems to be literally deconstructed in our midst, and yet the church, of course, will be affected by it. And so I'm going to say this, I'm going to name this hard thing. It's the reality that we want to wish wasn't happening, and yet it is. And in the face of this upheaval, we're going to have to dig deep again. Because the kind of strength we had to summon during the depths of the pandemic was about pulling together to meet the immediate needs right in front of us. And it was exhausting and challenging, but we usually knew what we needed to do. We needed to feed the hungry. We needed to clothe those who were cold. We needed to care for those who were alone. But this next stage of our upside down is going to challenge us in new ways, because it is the stage where we don't know exactly what we need to do. But we know that it has to be different because the world around us is different. So I want to remind you that before we rush to rebuild, let us contemplate what it has cost us spiritually and psychologically and physically, relationally, to barrel through doing ministry in the midst of a global pandemic. If we pretend that we were just doing business as usual, I just need, let's not pretend. That's not what was happening over the last 20 months. Our efforts, though, to rebuild will surely be thwarted if we fail to understand that we are rebuilding on top of trauma. It has been a trauma. And we need to witness to what is happening right now. I keep hearing stories all over the place where people are like, I'm so tired. Yes, it is not for no good reason. Second, I want you to know that through all of this, it might seem like me and my staff are like, here's another thing, here's another program. It seems like there's a lot going on because we're asking you to dig deep and to do things. But the only reason we're doing it is to assist you, to be with you, to try new things, and to answer the deep needs of the world around us. In our diocese, we're deeply investing in providing you the support and resources for each and every congregation and faith community that we have so that you can, in new ways, participate in God's mission. My staff and I are eager to meet with you, to walk with you, to talk with you about anything that's happening. If you're like, well, what is that program? Well, let us tell you. Let us unpack it for you. Let us help you use the thing that you most need. We're eager to tell you about all of it because it's the way that I pray we'll get on the other side of this. So we'll talk about the programs and the training and the consulting that we hope will revitalize our congregations and mission and ministry all over the place. And we have a lot of those programs that are on the website, you can find them, but they're all about, remember, what you need in your context to serve your people, what you need in your context to serve with your people. If you don't know where to start, whether it's the College for Congregational Development or the church buildings for collaborative partnerships, they all have a lot of names, a lot of words in these names. But we're going to keep saying them over and over again. Or faithful innovation living communities. We've heard these before over the last few years. And if you can't keep them straight, don't worry. Don't worry. Ken and Kristen, Ken and Brendan, Transition Minister Jen, like all of us are ready to help guide you and figure out how to use what we have in hand to serve your people. And while we seek to be faithful to what is, let us not forget to dream. Let us not forget to look forward, to dream. I can't fully answer the question of what is next, what comes next, but we're 5 years since the election of me as your bishop. 5 years, and so I've got a few hunches about what might be in store. You've heard a little bit about it earlier today. The Committee on Mission Strategy continues to do its work, using the data that you have helped to bring forth today to discern whether areas of collective energy are signs of the Holy Spirit at work. And this will inform a process for grants that will make funds available to any congregation seeking to be steadfast and innovative in doing ministry in their community and in growing in congregational vitality and health and energy. Any congregation. You will continue to hear updates about their work and this process in the new calendar year. You hear me talk about collaboration all the time. And so you're going to continue to hear how we're engaging the mission of collaboration and networking, whether it's within the neighborhoods of our churches or between our diocese and other dioceses. Mission partners in Brasilia and Haiti, collaborate is the word. Working together for God's mission with whoever is ready to play. So I pray that we'll always seek collaboration. Think collaboration first before thinking of just going forth on your own. Think of who can I partner with first before thinking let's just go and not ask others. These are the things that will help shift us as we try to not get through this on our own, but in relationship with those who share our mission and vision. That we are undertaking that church buildings for collaborative partnerships along with the Diocese of Northern Indiana is a sign of how we're hoping to do things differently in collaborative ministry. We're living this out in so many ways, and there'll be so much more to hear about that as we continue to think creatively about going forward together. As we emerge from the pandemic with new habits and realities of how and where we work, several of my staff don't even live in the state of Indiana anymore. I mean, like half of us don't even live in the state of Indiana, if you count up Canticle. We are all over the place. And so we're trying to figure out how to be collaborative across the miles, and yet how to be rooted right here in the diocese in ways that are connected to you a lot more effectively. And so we're going to get creative with that and hope to have a lot more to say about that too. In all of this, I can't say it looks exactly like this, but I know the future we're being called to is connected, it's collaborative, it's in partnership, and it's paying attention to what is as God calls us forward. And if you hear me say nothing else, know that I have only one goal, and that is to serve you faithfully, to make all of our congregations, every single last one of them, no matter how large, what kind of building, no building, my goal is to make sure that every single faith community of this diocese is growing more clear and more strong in their call to be places where people who long to make a difference in the world and to live boldly in the way of Christ are nurtured and fed and then sent out into the world to transform it. That's it. That's the goal. These are challenging times, maybe even frightening times for some. And it does feel sometimes as though we are living through a time of great endings. But saints, we can't live in the hope that new life has never been more possible. Like, this is the time. If it feels like things are ending, then new things must be beginning. We can live in that hope. New life has never been more possible. Never have we as Christians in the world have been more called to do the work of healing and justice. And there is no doubt, if you think that what you're doing doesn't matter, let me dissuade you of that notion right now. You matter. What you do matters. How you walk through your days, your weeks, your years, the relationships you build, the work you do, it matters. So hold fast to what Senator Kim Jackson told us in her words of hope. She said, let us be encouraged to be courageous. Be encouraged to be courageous in our words and in our actions. Remember Tina Chen's examples of what a congregation can do with a clear vision and a clear mission and can accomplish against all odds. Never forget that God goes before us in all things. And most of all, remember, even and especially in the most challenging of days, remember that this is not the end. This is just the beginning. Amen.